Okay, you guys, you all are up with me already. All right, I'm so glad to see you, Bernadette and Daryl. Happy New Year, Daryl. Okay, okay, okay. So you see who I've got with me today. I know you all are very excited. So I'm going to step back and let her go. Woohoo! This because with this, I needed to get Colleen Rowley's take on all of this because this is so consequential. Wow. I just, oh boy, this is a lot. Okay, so we are up in 15 seconds. Let me turn this down. 10. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a blessing to be with you today. We are talking about what is happening in Minneapolis. It's happening all over the country, but Minneapolis is ground zero. We're praying for the family of RENEE Good, mother of three, 37 years of age. She leaves behind a partner, children 15, 12, and 6. Think about that, everybody. Think about that. She was a poet. She was someone who was beloved by her friends and by her community. Um, and it appears that she was trying to get away. She was getting conflicting directions from ICE, but I'm going to leave all of that to Colleen Rowley because we have now seen over the past 24 hours, by the time you hear this, 36 hours or so, you will have heard the vice president weigh in, the president weigh in, the secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. You will have heard all of these people, and the vice president and the president and Secretary Nome are defending Jonathan Ross, who is the ICE agent, 10-year veteran, who shot and killed Robin Good. Now they are saying that he was traumatized by an event a few months ago. But we need to talk about that too, because while he was traumatized by that event, perhaps he needed hardship pay and he needed mental health assistance. Maybe he needed to be in a facility where he could really work all of that out. People who are in law enforcement, to be fair, have a very, very hard time. And they also have a very high incidence of domestic instances in their homes. You know, it's interesting. In the clergy, many of their marriages, if not most, the first ones end in divorce. Very, very high rate of divorce in the clerical community. But lots of domestic abuse in the communities where these men and women uh, run to keep us safe. It's it's just a fact. And so if he needed that kind of care, certainly he needed it. He didn't need to be out with people. He needed to be working amongst himself, within himself, to get himself well. If that is the defense that Vice President Vance is going to use, that you've got to feel sorry for a guy who's been traumatized. Yeah, I do. But that doesn't give him the right to kill someone because he's frightened. Think about that, or whatever it was. But we now see video footage of a physician who was right there. He shouted, "I'm a physician. May I take her pulse?" The ICE agent responded, "I don't care." He said, "Just may I take her pulse?" He said, "No." Someone else said, "We got medics coming." They didn't come for 15 minutes. They were blocked from coming in to the scene. It is just horrific. The more we find out about this, Colleen Rowley, wow, if we need a whistleblower, we need one right now because the FBI has done something very, very interesting. You are a former FBI agent. Indeed, you were one of Time Magazine's Persons of the Year because you were a 9/11 whistleblower. So now you got to help me to understand, where is this investigation? Because you were helping me to understand where it is and what the FBI is doing with all of this. Welcome to the show, and thank you for jumping in because I know you're traveling. you and your husband. So may God bless you both. But you wanted to jump on in, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in. So like and share, everybody. Please, I'm on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. I'm on X at Santita J, the Santita Jackson Show. Please like and share, and please go to the Santita Jackson Facebook page, Santita Jackson and Friends, the Santita Jackson Show here on YouTube. Like and share. I need you to give me the thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. That helps us with the algorithm. But like and share. Past the show from yesterday, we had Cornell West on, Dr. Cornell West, but we have Colleen Rowley, FBI whistleblower, who, ironically enough, is a Minnesotan. So this is her home. And this is the home of this station, of this show. So, Colleen Rowley, first of all, let's just step back. What happened?
Well, let me just give you one more context here from my background. Is when I got transferred to Minnesota from New York City, where I was working mafia and drug conspiracy matters in New York. And when I got transferred in 1990, the summer of 1990 to Minnesota, my job, I became the legal counsel, chief division counsel of the Minneapolis office, which covered a whole bunch of legal matters, including freedom of information, including victim witness matters, including any kind of lawsuit that occurred where the FBI got sued, a whole bunch of things. And I gave legal advice and constitutional law training to our entire division for 13 years, and to police officers in Minnesota. Anytime I was a peace officer accredited trainer, and that included the use of deadly force. In fact, it's the topic perhaps that is most important in all legal training of all law enforcement, is when you're allowed to use deadly force. There is qualified immunity for the use of deadly force because, in all fairness, police officers have very seconds to figure this out, and they're in changing conditions and lighting conditions, etc. So the courts do give qualified immunity for the use of deadly force. However, that doesn't mean that because you have a gun, and it's always loaded, by the way, that you can say, oh, they have my back, I can shoot anyone I want to. Okay, there's a big difference there. And in fact, in my 13-year career, I was privy. It didn't directly impact the Minneapolis office, but there was a case of an FBI agent at Ruby Ridge out west. And this guy Weaver had his entire family, and they had Marshall had already shot their 15-year-old son dead, and then the marshal had been shot dead. And then the FBI arrives on the scene. And I'm using this example to show that there are limits to what police officers and FBI agents and ICE agents can use deadly force. Okay, so you feel sorry for him in hindsight. The FBI sniper, his name was Lon Horiuchi, at Ruby Ridge, was given an order. And that order came from the second in command in the FBI, a guy by the last name of Potts. Now, no one knew this at the time. Of course, this was all secret. But Potts gave the order, turned out to be an illegal order. He gave an illegal order to shoot all males on site at Ruby Ridge. Okay? So when the doorway opens and Lon Horiuchi is a sniper, he takes a shot at a male he sees in the doorway. It hit the wife. It hit Weaver's wife, who was holding their baby. Okay, some people might know this history, but this became a really big deal in the FBI. Why? The FBI wanted to exonerate the sniper, their own sniper. Of course, they wanted to exonerate their own sniper. And they wanted to cover up the guy who had given this illegal order to shoot all males on site, because that's not the deadly force policy. You can't just say, even if you're the boss, Even if you're Donald Trump, even if you're the FBI director, you cannot give an illegal order telling agents to shoot people on site. It's not, that's completely illegal. So they wanted to cover that up. And they went on for years. And I want to say it was Utah law enforcement who were allowed to separately investigate the matter. It's not just that the FBI can order everybody to stand down. And that, by the way, the reason I'm talking about this history is because that seems to be what's going on right now in the present case. No, the FBI can't just order your state, Minnesota State Police. You know why? Because they have jurisdiction over murder. Murder is a statute that really is primarily a state crime. There are federal crimes of murder as well. And typically, by the way, when these kinds of cases would happen, it's not even typically. I want to say in all cases, almost all cases that I'm aware of, when there is a law enforcement shooting, what happens, it's jointly investigated. That means that both the feds and the state have jurisdiction. By law, they have jurisdiction according to the crime. And then, yes, they share evidence. And so somebody might do one interview, somebody might pick up a piece of forensic evidence, and it's all shared. And then the prosecutors make independent decisions. That's why, for instance, at Ruby Ridge, there was an independent decision by the Utah police to charge the FBI agent, Lon Horiuchi. And I'll just finish that thought, because in the bottom line with that story is it went on for years. More truth came out about it than the illegal order. Finally, they found out about that. Someone was a whistleblower and said, no, Potts gave this order. And he eventually got off, Horiuchi, but his life was destroyed. And so that's the end of that story. But I brought that up because it is essentially on all fours with what has gone on yesterday in Minnesota. And, here's the similarity. The police are put in this position where they're told, and I've also learned, I didn't know about this, but there was an order that Trump put out in September. It's called the National Security, or it's an executive order. And basically it dehumanizes, especially people in Minnesota. And it basically says ICE is the victim of radical leftists, domestic terrorists, and they're allowed to use force and etc. So it's very skewed order, executive order. Now, if you're in that kind of environment where that order has gone on, it's very similar to what Lon Horiuchi was told, that he was allowed to shoot the males on site. So that's the thing is this, and if you're following, this is what those four, or I guess it was 5 or 6 senators got into trouble for, and saying, don't follow illegal orders. Mm-hmm. By law, you cannot follow illegal orders. And so, you're supposed to know that even if your boss, even if you're in My Lai massacre and Callie says, shoot all the women and children that are lined up there, you're supposed to be like the Navy guy in the helicopter. And you're supposed to say, I'm not supposed to shoot non-combatant women and children. And of course, in the case of My Lai, one guy, actually the whole helicopter, landed and tried to let the people run because he knew this was illegal, what was going on. So it's the same thing in law enforcement. You can't follow an illegal order. And frankly, I am a little excited because everything has changed so dramatically from the time I retired in 2004. Once 9/11 happens, all of these things happen. And little by little, the entire context has changed so dramatically. But when I was working, I was I was required by the FBI policy to give legal training 4 times a year. and basically telling the agents the new case law. One of the big things that was happening when I was training was knock and announce. You had to knock on the door, wait a minute, announce your purpose and your authority, all these things. That was one of the big things that was going on at the time. But deadly force was a part of it. And we were required to give training 4 times a year. And of course, the training is you can only shoot, and basically, it's really simple. You can only shoot in defense of your own life or in defense of an innocent person. Okay, so if you were a sniper, for instance, and you saw a bad guy going to kill people, and you were in a position, yes, then you would be justified by the deadly force policy because he's killing innocent people. So those are the only things. So when you look at these, so going back to what's happened now is, when I was working, one of the things that all police, and if you talk to other police officers of a certain vintage, anybody probably over 55, 60 years old, or certainly like my age of over 70, they were in an environment where they were told they should all be like Andy Griffith of Mayberry, which was called community policing. Community policing, Andy Griffith never had to have his gun out on citizens of Mayberry. The citizens of Mayberry would never have shown up and called him used vulgar language with Andy of Mayberry. Why? Because it was a community policing situation. And all police departments, the chiefs of police, all of them, they were given training on community policing. It was the number one thing that they pushed. Why? You don't want to have shootings. You want to reduce violence as much as possible. You want to solve crimes, by the way, through the assistance of the public. Now, sure, Andy of Mayberry, I know this sounds very simplistic, but it's completely true. If you talk to a police chief who's 70 years old, he's going to tell you that community policing was absolutely pushed on all police at the time. And so, for instance, one of the main selling points is when you're trying to solve a crime, you need people in the community to tell you what happened. If it's a drug crime, you don't want to knock on the door and say, FBI, I'm trying to find out why this drug dealer, blah, blah, blah. And they'll say, get out of here, F you. We hate the police. Okay, of course, that was the problem. So you don't ever want that to happen. You want people to tell you what happened. You want to solve murders through people telling you. Ponzi schemes. You know what? The FBI can never solve a Ponzi scheme unless there's a whistleblower, unless the accountant comes in and tells the FBI what's gone on. So you never want what Trump has done, which is creating this hatred between the community and police on both sides. On both sides, he's created a lot of suspicion by the community because he said the community, Minnesota is full of Somalian fraudsters. And in the case of RENEE Good, he called her a domestic terrorist. They imply that if you go to observe an ICE arrest, even though some of the ICE arrests have been very bad, and people know in the George Floyd case and in other cases that police have overreacted. So so many people want to be there as legal observers. Why did they want to have the videotape in the George Floyd is what proved what happened. So someone has to be there taping it. And so in the ICE raids, and they arrested wrong people. They weren't illegal aliens. They were just ethnically targeted or whatever. So people have said, okay, I'm not going to interfere with police, but I can be outside and at least I can take, like has happened with the present case, people took videotapes. So luckily, the good thing is there is a lot of evidence now of what happened because there were observers. The Department of Homeland Security and even this order that has come down in September from Trump it maybe doesn't say this outright, but it implies that people in the community are the enemy and that they are interfering with law enforcement. Now, this isn't not correct. And so, of course, now when this is already ratcheted up, it's a really bad situation now, because now you do have many people in the community who rightfully see what's happened, and for starters, they are going to be afraid of the police. They're not going to ever want to tell the police anything they do know. And it's also created a situation of further escalation. And I actually did an interview the night yesterday, right after it happened. And I said, you know what this reminds me of? It's the Kent State moment of the Vietnam War. Because what happens is that when your government launches preemptive strikes, which happened right after 9/11, then they said, we don't have to be defending ourselves. We can launch a preemptive strike on Iraq. If that was a domestic situation, completely unlawful. You can't have preemptive strikes. That's against the deadly force policy. That's like saying, that's like Clint Eastwood in the movies. I know he's a bad guy. I'll shoot him ahead of time. These are bad guys.
But hold on, let's take people back to Kent State, because I want people to be clear on these historical references. Because some people don't remember Lieutenant Calley. Some people don't remember Kent State. You know, the iconic photograph, you see this young co-ed crying in agony over a dead body, one of her fellow students. Please describe that.
Well, in the Vietnam War progresses, and again, here's the similarity. People get outraged. Body bags are coming back. You know, what was it? 50,000 soldiers died. I think something like that. And, you know, as time went on and they continue to say it's hopeless, even Cronkite said it was hopeless, the students at the time started protesting. And there was a draft. By the way, there was a draft. So people were being sent involuntarily to Vietnam. And there were protests. There were protests in Minnesota. They were all over the place. In some cases, they had sit downs in university buildings. Well, then the law enforcement, you know, and again, I wouldn't say it's necessarily law enforcement's idea, but top down orders come. And I think I'm not an expert on Kent State or Jackson State, by the way. There were two of these shootings, but I know that you lined up National Guard and they are armed. Okay, so when you are armed and you're told that, oh, the protesters are moving, again, people get nervous. And at some point, someone thought they heard a shot. I think that's what happened at Kent State. Someone thinks they hear a shot, and all of a sudden the shots ring out. What, 2 or 3 students were killed, something like that? I think 2 or 3. And then at Jackson State, another one was killed, I think shot through a window or something like that, if I remember. So when the war, and I know this, people don't like to know that when we take the cue from our leadership. And so when you go all the way back to the war starting after 9/11, and we're told we have to be preemptive to make everyone safe, we aren't going to react in a defensive way or whatever. We're going to be preemptive and get the terrorists ahead of time. And of course, they said that Iraq was behind 9/11, which was a complete lie. And what happens eventually is that mentality of preemption migrates back domestically. And then as people, you know, protest against wars, against genocide, against ICE raids, against a lot of things, even the price of eggs and everything, you know, there's a lot of reasons for people to be lawfully using their First Amendment rights to be out on the street. And that violence has ratcheted up to the point where now we have a president saying that they can target, and I would say Minnesota's number 1 on the target list, became number one on the target list in the last couple of weeks, especially when he sent all the ICE agents here. And then use the Somalian fraud as another reason. And there's just been a whole series of things. They've gone into schools now and handcuffed school officials in Minnesota, making the schools close down. Unbelievable. But what this should be right now is I think Trump should call a time. If Trump was smart, he would call a timeout right now, a cooling off. Well,
how would that work? What would he do?
How would it work would be easy. He'd just say, for right now, he wouldn't have to say forever. He'd say, for right now, I am having a cool down period because of the situation, and the ICE will no longer be out there raiding schools and going door to door. Apparently, Vance said ICE is now ordered to go door by door in Minnesota.
That's what he said. He said that today.
I mean, that's the opposite. The opposite would be ordering a cool down period. And that would actually be the safest approach for everybody right now. And I mean, I don't know for how long that should exist, but if I was Trump and I had a situation like this, that's what I do.
Well, wait a minute. Let's back up. What's the situation? Because as I'm watching the news right now, there were thousands of people out peacefully demonstrating the night of the murder. Now, people have been out all over Minneapolis, and there are sympathy protests all over the country. It seems that it's almost like it's another George Floyd moment. Something I don't know where. I mean, I'm just saying that initially because it is. This is something that this is something that we saw live.
And there's even another wrinkle on it beyond George Floyd, which is that now even our state officials, our State Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and they are the BCA is the entity under state law that investigates nearly all law enforcement shootings in Minnesota. And they have long experience doing this. They are the so-called professionals. They're fairly independent because, the police department, let's say it's a police department that had the shooting. No one would ever say that police department gets to be the sole arbiter and investigator. So they came up, the state BCA, and they became very good at these investigations. Now, they normally take a while to investigate. In this case, they have the videotapes, they have witnesses to interview, they have, distances to measure, forensic evidence. And normally this takes a little while to put together the investigation in order to present it to a prosecutor. In this case, again, completely different than anything I've ever heard of. You had the head of Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, go out and say, well, this woman is a domestic terrorist. He was within his rights because he was defending himself. She didn't go through any investigation. Mm-hmm. Trump said something even dumber. He said that the ICE agent got run over. I mean, he didn't even have the facts correct, but yet immediately pronounced, we're going to exonerate this guy and no investigation necessary.
No, but stay right there. Look, let me ask you, because they did that immediately. It had just happened. Now, as someone from law enforcement, how did that strike you?
It should strike anyone in law enforcement as completely unusual. This is never now. You always see the press conferences after a police shooting, and everyone will remember the police chiefs that are in authority are very careful. They are very careful. Typically, what they will say is, just by standard practice, this officer is on administrative leave. We are gathering the facts. And when we have come up with concluded what we have, then we'll present it to a prosecutor. So they're very careful about it. I have never heard of someone in charge coming out within minutes and saying the victim of a shooting is a domestic terrorist and tried to was trying to kill the officers or whatever that they said, and ran over the ICE officer, which is even factually incorrect. I've never heard of this. Now, you might have a police chief who would be biased for their own people. Of course, that's the case. They do want to protect their own people, but nothing like this. And then today, it goes a step further. And this is a far step further than George Floyd. This is now the FBI telling the BCA, get out of here. We are not sharing any information or evidence with you. We will do the whole thing solely.
Now, what is the BCA? And tell me why this
is. It stands for the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. So one of the main things, they're kind of like the FBI of Minnesota. They're not federal. There's the state, kind of like the state FBI. One of the main things that the Minnesota, besides law enforcement shootings, that's one of their main responsibilities. But they also work on some really hard murder cases. I used to know a couple people in the Attorney General's office who were prosecutors. So cold cases, for instance. So some of these really hard to solve old cold murder cases from 20 or 30 years ago. The BCA would take those cases, look at them again, and in some cases, they would actually be able to solve them. Some of them have made it onto Dateline that the Minnesota BCA picked up. So, they do other things as well. They have, just like the FBI, their own forensic lab. And so, and again, like in terms of experience in investigating law enforcement shootings, they're the experts. They're the experts. Frankly, not the FBI. The FBI wouldn't, I could tell you right now, the agents would not have that expertise. They would simply not have that expertise. The ones that normally have it. And why? Because murder is normally under state jurisdiction. It's not a federal crime. Some drug murders, there are some RICO murders, mafia murders that fall under FBI, but the majority of your run-of-the-mill, a man murders his wife, that type of thing, those are all state crimes. And so our BCA are the experts on it. And it's very unusual. Again, I have never heard of this happening, of the FBI saying, we'll handle it ourselves. We're not going to share any information or evidence with the local law enforcement. Because when I was working, when there were cases, there were some law enforcement shootings when I was working, they were always worked together jointly. If they did both have jurisdiction, then they were worked jointly. It was never like, we'll take over here. Now, in a case, like I said, with this Lon Horiuchi case, sniper case out in Ruby Ridge, that can lead to problems for the FBI. In a very rare cases, because the state did have its own jurisdiction, it led to a big problem for the FBI. One of the agents was indicted for murder and actually I think he even had to stand trial and everything. It was a very difficult thing for the FBI. But even in that case, there was no pressure and leaning on the Utah authorities to say, forget it. You can't handle this. And I don't think the BCA should back down. I know it would be very difficult for them. I heard Keith Ellison today give an interview, and
the Attorney General.
Yeah, our Attorney General in Minnesota gave an interview, and he was desperately trying to maintain a shared investigation with the FBI and the BCA. And you know why? He's right. If you do not allow some kind of shared investigation, law enforcement will lose its credibility. And again, what is the public going to think about this case? They have the videos, by the way. They can see these things for themselves and draw their own conclusions. A jury without a jury, without, first of all, a prosecutor looking at this investigation and coming up with their idea. Okay, I think that this should go to trial, or I don't think it should go to trial. First, the prosecutor gets to make that decision, and then an actual trial, like in the George Floyd case, in Chauvin case, or like in the Horiyuchi case. I think that went to trial too. And so maybe, I'm not 100% sure, but it went on for years, and I can't remember if it actually went to trial. I want to say it did, but I'm not sure. Any event, the jury, this is what our system, this is what our Constitution, our Sixth Amendment right to jury trial is on the line here, because we want a jury to look at the same things we're looking at, the evidence and the witnesses, what the witnesses saw, what was said, all of these things. And that's what our system says, is let the jury decide.
So wait a minute. So let me ask you this. This means if the FBI, so is essentially the FBI taking over the case, and does that mean we would not have a jury trial?
This means right now, and again, this could change. I hope it does change. But what I heard this morning was that the BCA said, because the FBI will not share the evidence with us, we have no way of investigating. And they were backing out of even looking at the case, which means that then the FBI can basically take it to a federal prosecutor. By the way, the federal prosecutors are all named by Trump. And this is a top-down thing. This is where the public will lose respect for law enforcement and respect for the law itself. Everyone's going to lose respect. I mean, I hate to say this, because when we have mass killing breakout and stuff, some of this is because no one has respect for law and order anymore. Because why? Because we're watching our highest level leadership set the mode here. And again, I'm going to go back to our FBI guy who gave an illegal order to the snipers to shoot all armed males on sight. That's an illegal order. And so when this is happening, you have people then taking the law into their own hands. This causes vigilantism. Even people like Crooks, the young kid who tried to shoot unhinged young guy that tried to shoot Trump. But there's Bolter, there's many of them like that. Once they see that they're in a situation where there's no law, respect for law, no rule of law, and no one respects this anymore, people feel free to take the law into their own hands. And what was appalling when I was in the car today and yesterday and today, channel surfing and listening to all this talk about law doesn't matter anymore. I cannot believe how much of this is going on. Stephen Miller was in an interview with Jake Tapper. Yeah. And he said, international law, no one has ever followed that. By the way, this is not just international law. This is international law is also domestic law in many ways. And so you can't have preemptive shootings. You can't have genocide. Why? Because now people think they can do it. They say, well, if my leaders are doing this, they're rationalizing killing of children. Well, I can do that too. Why don't I shoot people? And you're seeing this over and over repeating. It's why I warned about this back when they decided to go to the Iraq War. Violence migrates home. And when you want a militaristic society where violent video games are the recruitment tool for the military, and the young guy at Newtown grows up watching all these shooting games, and he says, okay, I'll go to the school and shoot all the kids. And people they don't understand that is that easy to incite certainly a lot of people that become unhinged. And we have a problem right now in the United States. I know this is a little bit off topic, but it's not really off topic. the wars have migrated home. Kent State was a good example of the wars migrating home. And I think that what we're seeing with these ICE raids and demonizing, not just demonizing foreign populations. We're not the Palestinian terrorists, the Russians, the Iraqis, the Libyans, all the demonization that has gone into killing of millions of people in foreign countries. And now we're seeing it from our government saying all the, and by the way, this is in an order. It's implied in one of the executive orders in September that certain states, obviously the enemy states of led by Democrats, I think your Chicago is probably on the list as well.
We're on the list. But help me to understand but I think what you're giving us is the context for what happened and what is happening. Because now there's a newsflash that there were 2 federal agents who just shot 2 people out in Portland. And it just seems like they have the latitude to do whatever it is that they want to do. And I'm wondering about, what is it, posse comitatus? Where you were not supposed to deploy federal troops. Would you explain that?
That's right. And this is going to hurt. It isn't one side or the other. It's going to hurt everybody. The reason we have law, we have a minimum standard, one of the basic things, thou shalt not commit murder. It is the most, our cavemen, before, when they were just even evolving from whatever, they didn't even have written laws. They realized we have to have some basic understanding that we can't murder each other. We cannot have a civilization or a community at all if we allow some horrible things. Once you say, we don't have to follow the law anymore. We make our own laws. You follow the law. You're the serfs or whatever. We're the king. We're above it. It is not going to help anyone. And police should understand this. They are not, if they want to be good at their job. And again, I know it sounds simplistic with this Andy of Mayberry, but in fact, for decades, that was the model. That was the model that was taught even at chiefs of police conferences, that the speakers would say, this is how you want to run your community. You want the community to respect law. Everyone wants to solve crimes. I often talk to people, about policing, and I'll say, well, no one wants to have, for instance, your husband murder you. You want the police to show up and stop the husband from murdering. And people will just sit there and look at it because they've been so brainwashed. People get ratcheted up into these things. And it is, by the way, very difficult job for the police. Going back to one thing we haven't talked about, which was the prior experience of this officer. Because when I was talking on the interview the first time yesterday, I didn't know how much experience the officer had. And I said, a lot of these ICE agents were hired and they got very little training. And actually, they even complained about it. The ICE agents that were hired have complained about not getting adequate training. And of course, it doesn't help when they get this top-down orders and things about, you're the victims, and when the public shows up, they're going to be interfering with you, just like domestic terrorists and all this. So this was very wrong. And I didn't know how much experience. Apparently, the officer who shot was experienced, but his experience was that he had been dragged by a car and pretty seriously hurt, and actually could have, when you get caught up in a car that's dragging you, that is a serious, that's life endangering for sure. But what you said, when that kind of a thing happens to somebody, they shouldn't be given the gun and said, okay, now go out. And what you've learned is that if you get close to this, you shoot first before anything like this can happen. No, that's the opposite, the worst lesson that can be drawn from that. No, typically when agents or officers are caught up in this, they get a time off, they get therapy, and only when they're extremely what do you say, readjusted and able to understand again. They want to turn back into somebody like Andy Griffith of Mayberry. They don't want to be someone that I got to shoot first. And apparently I saw the videotapes. This guy already has his hand on his gun as he's walking there. And again, maybe because of his prior experience. The law, the test of reasonableness, okay, going back to deadly force policy, when it gets judged as to whether it was reasonable use of deadly force, it's not subjective, okay? That officer can't say, well, because I had that prior traumatic experience, I'm different. I had a subjective fear that it might happen again. That's not what the law says. The law says it has to be objectively reasonable. So it can't just be what he himself has subjectively experienced. That's not what, if he goes into court, the jury instructions are not going to be, oh, this officer, feel sorry for him, jury. That's not what the jury is going to be instructed. He had a prior, he could argue that maybe ahead of time, but that's not the test. The test is whether his use, and of course you're not supposed to shoot somebody first before there's a lot of things that went on here that with the woman, as you said, getting conflicting orders. How fast was she moving back and forth? She didn't hit that officer, according to Trump. That was wrong. She didn't run over the officer.
But Colleen, he chased her.
Yeah,
and
walked towards
started shooting her. Help me to understand how this. Help us to understand given your training, your understanding, how this unfolded, because she looked confused. And
you're only to shoot someone.
Why didn't he shoot her tires? Right?
Well, okay, for the proper justified use of deadly force is only to stop the threat. It's to stop the threat. He shot 3 times. So the first shot was apparently to her head. Okay, why did he shoot 2 more times? Okay, for starters, that's one of the things. You know what? If you're in the jury, if this ever went to a jury, they would have to be asked that questions. Why would he shoot after she's already shot in the head? And she was unarmed. That's the other thing.
But why shoot her in the head? Why?
Well, if you actually had somebody who was armed and going to shoot you, you don't shoot their legs or shoot in the air a warning shot. The FBI policy is you shoot somebody only to stop the threat. And so there is no such thing as a warning shot, and there's no such thing as shooting somebody in the movies. In the movies, they do this, but that's not real life. But you're not, there's so many things going on here. I would say that because of, I think the BCA doesn't even have to have the FBI share all the evidence. Why? Because there's so much evidence that's already public. I think the BCA should still continue their investigation because there's a lot of this, and they can do their interviews separately. They can interview the people. They don't have to rely upon FBI interviews of witnesses. They can do their own. I'm not quite sure why they said from the start, okay, FBI, you want sole authority, or you go ahead. I think the BCA, and maybe between you and I, maybe there was something more going on here. Maybe there were some more threats going on to the BCA. Hey, back off. We're going to do this. I don't know that for sure, but it seems really unusual to me because, like I said, murders are state crimes. They're not. There's a small category that are federal, that there's shared jurisdiction, but mostly murders are under state authority. And so for the BCA, I'm hoping that was wrong this morning. And maybe Ellison and others have been able to say, no, you should do your own investigation, because a lot of this is very clear. Because why? Because of the videotapes. Because there were people who witnessed it. A lot of times murders are hard to, all the cases that you see on Dateline, and they have circumstantial evidence and little things, and it's very difficult for a jury to decide those ones. This one, there's a lot of evidence already available, and I don't know why.
But help me, but it seems like the feds have an awful lot invested in this. Kristi Noem, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, jumped out immediately. They're having the White House press conference, the Vice President comes, and they are heavily invested, and the President, everybody at that level, they are very invested in making Jonathan Ross, the ICE agent who shot and killed RENEE Good, he did nothing wrong. They're very, very, very focused on that. And that to me is very, that's interesting. You could say that it's unusual. To me, it's very interesting. And I'm suspicious of that. I don't understand that.
The Trump campaign had a handful of issues that they ran on, and one was immigration, the scapegoating of illegal immigrants as the source of all crime and problems. Well, there's a lot of problems in the United States, especially with crime and mass killing and everything else. And I don't think it's fair to lay the blame on all of the illegal immigrants, but they did. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, and especially in the Trump base, agree with that. If you cannot protect when these orders come down, and then later someone gets into trouble, guess what? It does fall apart. They do have a lot invested in this. All of them do. Vance, Stephen Miller, Kristi Noem, the head of, apparently his name was Bovino or something like that.
Dan Bongino?
No, not Bongino.
Not Bongino?
It's something. He's the head of ICE, and I think he was out in the public this morning at the protest. And he was going down the line of the ICE agents, patting them on the back. Okay. And so some of the, there was a woman, she was interviewed by the radio. There was a woman who was a therapist who actually counsels a lot of suicidal, even law enforcement people who become suicidal. By the way, you talked about divorce in law enforcement. Suicide's very high in law enforcement, just like the military. And so she actually counsels, and she's a therapist, and she was trying to talk very nicely and civilly to the ICE agents there. And they were actually having a conversation. She goes, "You don't want to do this. You don't want to engage in these things. Your life will be destroyed as well." She was actually crying during this interview because of how bad this has progressed. And then at the same time, then the news breaks in and said, "Oh, I think his name's Bovino or Buvino has shown up."
Bodino, that's what they're saying. Bovino, excuse me.
Yeah, Bovino.
Gregory Bovino. Thank you, okay. Correctional officer, for the lockdown.
And he had shown up. And so the news said, what's he here for? Is he ratcheting up greater antipathy between the protest side and the ICE side because they're all facing off? And like I said, some were even talking to each other. What's he doing here? Is he going to make the situation worse? And apparently he was joking and laughing with the ICE agents, patting them all on the back. You did a good job. Keep up the good work, blah, blah, blah. And, going back, he's following his boss's orders because this is a huge deal for the Trump. If anything, why did he attack Venezuela? He has this macho, I don't know what you want to call it, but he's some people call it the bullying, but if you go all the way back to his reality TV show, that's what his brand was. His brand was this big bully. I'm so powerful, I can fire anyone. And now he's using this in terms of the military, and in terms of ICE. And yes, he has everything riding on it. Everything riding on it. And again, I just wish that somebody, again, in law enforcement, even in the U.S. attorney's offices, would remember we have to have respect for the rule of law, because it is just going up in smoke right now. And it's not just going to be, again, if you're in law enforcement, you would not want to see this happen. When I first joined the FBI in 1981, right after the Vietnam War was over, right after the Church Committee had found out all the COINTELPRO and how the FBI had been mishandling things. You know what? When we were actually in training school, we were told the public doesn't love us anymore. We were told this when I was in training school in 1981. You may be knocking on a door trying to do a background investigation because the neighbor has been named to a judgeship. We have to go and talk to all the neighbors when someone gets named to a position. And you'll just be knocking on a door to say, how's your neighbor? Is he a good guy? He's up for a judgeship. And you know what? They won't answer the door. And
my mother would not have answered.
And we all found out that in the early 80s, because of what had happened in the prior decade, that was somewhat true. It took a long time to build that trust back up, where people would actually report crimes to the FBI. They'd answer their door. When you said, oh, FBI, I just have a few questions, at least they'd answer the door. Guess what? It has slid backward, big time backward. And I think this is what, again, if you are able to understand that we do not want to go into this kind of totalitarian situation, demonizing Americans, like RENEE Good, a mother of 3. I mean, as if she's some kind of, this is ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. If you were smart and you were part of the Trump administration, you'd call for some cooling off period right now. You just say, we're gonna put it on hold. That's what I would, maybe we're gonna put these ICE raids. Vance, on the other hand, saying, oh, we're gonna ratchet it up. We're gonna start going door to door. That's the absolute opposite of what they should be doing.
Hold that thought. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, the Santita Jackson Show. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, the Santita Jackson Show. We're just going to go a little long right now because I have a couple of more questions for Colleen Rowley, former FBI agent, whistleblower, asking her about really helping us to understand the culture of law enforcement, the culture of federal law enforcement, the differences between the federal and the local and the state. Because many of us don't know that. And I think that if we understand a lot of the information that she's giving us, it helps us to really process how this case is being handled. Because instead of this being handled on the state level or locally, the White House is very eager to overtake this case. And now I'm wondering there's several questions I have for you. How, in this environment, as inflamed as the Minneapolis community seems to be, and quite frankly, America, because I was speaking to people yesterday and they were on their way downtown for sympathy marches. It's winter, but there were thousands of people out in the cold last night, all over the country. And there are people who are out today. Help me to understand how is it even feasible to go door to door? I mean, how would ICE be received going to door to door? I mean, that neighborhood where we saw RENEE Good and the physician outside, I have a question about that. That looked like a solidly middle class neighborhood. Solidly middle class, if not upper middle class, when you looked at the size of some of the homes. or borderline upper middle class. That having been said, it was not a poor area. And it helped me to understand, is it, what would be the point of going door to door, and is that even feasible now?
I'll tell you, you can knock on a door, you can't get in without a warrant. So and I think with the schools now, I don't know exactly what they've been doing, but it looks like they're waiting for students to come out of the schools because, if they go, I don't think they necessarily need a warrant, but the schools are all locked up. And so if you're an ICE agent and you think there's a high school student who's an illegal whatever, you have to come up with ways of waiting. It is difficult. They don't have probable cause. Going back to why would you go door to door? If you have probable cause that there is someone who has committed a crime and is in that house, you have to get a warrant for it. And, so if you have probable cause, that's what you would do. If you don't have probable cause, maybe, you can go up and try to knock on the door. I mean, it's very intrusive and it's not a good method, and it's going to make everybody mad. It's going to continue, ratchet this up even further. Vance has no idea what he's saying about this.
Does he, or is this part of maybe some plan to inflame the community so that you can justify the 2,000 plus officers who have been deployed, so we can basically federalize? I felt like what I'm watching now are just the brown shirts. Because we don't have freedom of movement. It just feels like this is wow.
The one thing, again, it's so counterproductive. The one thing that this isn't going to do is help Trump or the Republican Party win the next election in Minnesota. How can you do anything that would be just opposite of helping you win votes for the next election? Think about in Minnesota, the Republican candidates. We have 2 open Senate seats. Apparently now we have 2 open Senate seats, and there will be Republicans and Democrats running for those seats. I wouldn't want to be the Republican in trying to win one of these Senate seats now, even if you were somebody like, we had Durenberger. I'm trying to think in the past, Coleman, what was his name? Anyway.
I remember who,
yeah.
Okay. Paul Wellstone.
Yeah, Paul Wellstone. He was
who replaced Paul Wellstone.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
But if you were one of these candidates, I think you'd be kind of like, why are you doing this? This isn't going to help me at all.
George Conway is going to run as a Democrat.
Right.
This is Kelly Conway's ex-husband.
So, you think about it, it doesn't make much sense, except it makes sense from the standpoint of a psychology background of understanding this group of people. And they've done this internationally. And you heard all of those speeches, like, look what we did to Venezuela. We can take down Russian tankers. We can go after anybody we want to. We have the most powerful military. The rule of law does not apply to us anymore. You heard all of this talk. The thing is, that talk that we apply to the rest of the world, by the way, since 9/11, at least 5 or 6 million foreign people have been killed in what we've done. And all of that was applied abroad, demonizing these places, and Trump, there's a theory that Trump has accelerated it. Okay, so it's called, he's an accelerationist. So because the U.S. empire, imperialism, soft power to control the world wasn't working as well as before because of our loss of economic power. The U.S. lost a lot of economic power in the last it's manufacturing, a whole bunch of things, and the debt We're at 38 trillion, going on 39 trillion. All of these things have hurt our soft power. So Trump comes along and says, we don't need soft power. We'll just use our hard military force and we'll use it on the rest of the world. And good luck. What can they do? What can they do about it? And that's where we're at right now. The problem with that, even if you're a proponent of this, which I'm not, but even if you're a proponent of the use of hard military force to control the world, the blowback is on the United States. It's on the people of this country in many, many ways. And again, if you think it's just about the use of proxy forces and we don't have a draft, so we don't care. My husband and I were just driving through West Virginia, and all of the road in this section of West Virginia that we were driving through is all named after poor West Virginian soldiers that were killed, officers and soldiers that have been killed in the wars, obviously since 9/11. So you see one name after another. And so this, maybe it helps appease, assuage the families to think, oh, my son or daughter didn't die in vain. They have this part of the road named after them now. But that kind of thing that we've done abroad in the use of our military has now come back, and it is now being applied. And that's why I said this is a Kent State moment. It's now being applied to Americans. You wonder how long it can work. I don't know. I'm not going to offer any predictions on how this is going to end up because I'm very worried. I don't know how exactly. Maybe, we kind of talked about this before. Long term history tends to have this kind of thing doesn't work. And the blowback is so great that eventually it ends.
Do you see I'm getting all these questions for you, and I just want if you could answer a couple of them. I think Solomon has Solomon, correct me if I'm wrong. Do you have a law enforcement background? Certainly he is very, very sympathetic to law enforcement, and I'm not anti-law enforcement. I'm just anti-corruption. And I don't like it when anyone abuses power, period. So let's just be very clear, because I'm not going to say anything as trite as I have a lot of friends who are in law enforcement, but the fact is I do, and I want them to be all right. But I know you can't be all right if people don't trust you. That's it. And he says what you don't get is that there's an organized effort to impede ICE. And that's why the dead woman was there. You sound very much like President Trump and Vice President Vance and Kristi Noem. She left her kids at home to go to Minnesota. That was the block that she was living on, to stalk and impede ICE. What do you say to that? Because there are some people who really believe that, including Solomon. Thank you, Solomon.
In any kind of a group, you can't attribute an intent to everybody in a group. And, even a protest events like that. There can be people that can show up. There can be in a protest, a peaceful march or protest, there can be a person that can show up who actually is an arsonist. Mm-hmm. An arsonist, there are people, by the way, they get excited by starting fires. That, I hate to tell, that's reality. Mm-hmm. And I agree with Solomon. I mean, the crime, I worked in for 24 years. I worked on serial killings. I mean, I know there is people don't want to know that. People don't necessarily want to know that this is that bad, and they don't want to know that there are anti-social people. There are more and more unhinged people, by the way, that are engaging in mass killings. Okay, so right off the start, you cannot attribute a group of people any kind of uniform intent. Everybody, but by and large, if you go to exercise your First Amendment rights and stand outside an event and don't interfere with the police, and you're just there taking a video, and the police can't tell you to stop taking the video either. And when I first came here to Minnesota, we had FBI agents that grabbed the cameras away from WCCO and I think the Star Tribune, because they were at some kind of, maybe it was an undercover drug deal or something, and somehow the cameras showed up, and the FBI said, "Give me your camera, give me your camera. You can't do that." No, actually, if you're in a public place, you have the right to tape record. That is a First Amendment right. You have the right of assembly. You have the right of free speech, the right of free press, all of those things. And you know what? We don't want to be in a situation where our government says you can't do that anymore. The federal government is implying that you can't. Now, if you are blocking, I do a protest where I have a banner. We can't block a sidewalk. So if we are standing with something blocking the sidewalk, yeah, the police can come and say, hey, move back a ways, and we're on public property, move back so that people can walk along the sidewalk, or on one of these freeway overpasses the same way. We don't block. We stand on the side. We don't block. We can't interfere. There's a difference between not interfering and still being able to exercise your lawful rights of your First Amendment. And there's a reason for that, because you can be on the other end of being beat up or something, and you would want people to have cameras out. You would want that. That's the right of citizens. So I don't know that there is the organization that I'm aware of is that people, if they spot an ICE operation, yes, they have a communication with others, and they'll say, "Oh, such and such is happening here. Come, everyone, come." So yes, that's also within your rights. That's not any kind of nefarious conspiracy to impede ICE. That is actually, it's within your rights. You can say, "Oh, I spot ICE people here and at this location, and people can come." You can't block traffic. You can't certainly assault. By the way, this came up with abortion clinics. When I was working in the FBI, I was asked to give training in, I want to say it was South Dakota, because there were protesters, right to life protesters of an abortion clinic in South Dakota. And at some point, something had happened where somebody had used the F word with a police officer. And the police officer had then overreacted. And of course, when I was called, the South Dakota people said, "Well, we just because you're called a name, if you're law enforcement, you can't overreact and grab the person and hit them or whatever." I go, "No, of course not." But it's amazing when you're in these situations that people don't understand those lines. So if you want to protest an abortion clinic and you're on a public area, and you have right to life signs or whatever, you're allowed by the United States Constitution to do that. Now, if you see somebody walking in, you can't assault them. You can maybe yell something, but you can't assault them. There are lines between what is a protest and what is legal observing and what is impeding or interfering. And I actually, from what I know, is people have been told, the people on the protest side have been told that. They have been told what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. And as far as I can see, this woman was she got conflicting orders from two different police officers, but she was trying to follow the orders. One told her to get out of the car and one told her to move away or something. It was conflicting, but we'll find that out. I don't know for sure what the facts are, but this is just what I've read. And you know what? This is a reason for a proper investigation and not for Kristi Noem to say we handle it ourselves without any investigation.
Before you go, what does it say about the atmosphere when you have a physician who witnessed and he identifies himself? He says, as he's looking at RENEE Good, bloody head on her steering wheel. I mean, because I saw the video, it's awful. And he says, "May I check her pulse?" And they said, "I don't care. I don't care that you're a physician." And he said, "Can I just go check and see how she's doing?" And the other agent said, "No, We've got medics coming. The medics didn't come for 15 minutes. They had been blocked from getting into the area. What does it say about who these people are and what they're doing?
I would imagine, if nothing else, that there will be civil lawsuits resulting from this. And that physician would definitely be called as a witness in a civil lawsuit. Because, yeah, denying medical care at that point, it just strikes everybody as really wrong.
Who would
You
be
know?
sued? Would it be the federal government? I mean, are
Oh,
they
yeah.
ahead of
Oh,
that?
well, the officer, you can, there's a case called Bivens. It's been restricted in the past several years, because but if you violate the Constitution, there is a cause of judgment even against the agencies and against the individual officer for liability. And it's not just general liability, it's individual liability. So you can sue. I don't know if you remember, this happened, people here would remember this more so but in Minnesota during the 1990s, especially the early 90s, there were a lot of problems with the Minneapolis police. This just didn't happen with George Floyd. So in the early 90s, there were beatings by law enforcement. They'd lose their temper. There's a whole book, by the way, written about this called Walking with the Devil: What Bad Cops Do and Good Cops Won't Tell You. Excellent book. Excellent book. It was written by the Minneapolis police trainer. I forget his name. I knew him. I met him before. And it's a great book. And it was about a lot of incidents that happened in the Minneapolis Police Department. And, it's hard to prosecute back then, they didn't have to have cameras. So when you would look at the case, you didn't even have the videotape. But in one case, a Minneapolis police officer beat a St. Thomas hockey player. I want to say he was a St. Thomas hockey player, a university student, beat him pretty badly. The officer was a bouncer at a bar, and he beat him up. And there's pictures of him all black and blue. And they didn't prosecute for whatever reason. Again, it was one of these, protect the police things. And they didn't prosecute, but that student got an attorney and he won $1 million from the Minneapolis Police Department. At the time, it was the biggest payout they've ever had to do. And then the police were under pressure to try to rein in some of this rogue policing that was going on, where they were beating up people. And they became under more and more pressure. Ultimately, you get the George Floyd case and everything else. So we're supposed to, under our system of rule of law, have some checks and balances to try to make so that we have good policing. And that, by the way, the police can do their jobs. Again, this is for also on behalf of the police. We want police when they give an order, and we want people to obey that order. We don't, if it's a dangerous situation, and I'm trying to think of a situation where there could be a public safety situation, and the police say, "Don't go there, don't go there. There's a fire going on. Don't do that." You want people to listen to that, and you don't want the situation where this respect, this mutual respect, and this community policing breaks down. You don't want this situation because it's leading already to violent chaos. It's already led that way, and unfortunately, I predict worse unless this can be some people with more calm-headed, wise. We remember there was one police chief. I think he's deceased now. He's very old, and he used to try to do his best. I forget his name. He's a really old guy now, but they've done the documentaries about him because he was one of the police chiefs who tried very hard to make this balance and more of a community policing effort. But right now, it's this goal of ICE raids and targeting certain states and implying that the people in that state are leftist radicals, whatever. That's a dehumanizing term. and the people that are following the orders take the cue that they're allowed to get away with things, and that can happen. It's happened many times in history, in the military and also in policing, and we don't want that to repeat itself.
What should we be looking at just going forward? Because I believe that we're at the beginning of this. I mean, this
You
is not
know,
something that will be shut down. Do you think that we will have more protests? I mean, more demonstrations?
well, people that are going to go out to, I'm all in favor of protests and demonstrations. They should try to be as civil and this woman that was trying to talk to the ICE people is a very good example. She was doing really good, trying to tell them why they don't want to be involved in this, and it's going to ruin their lives as well. And she was excellent on the news. That's what people should be doing. They should be calling their own elected leaders. And like I said, with respect for law enforcement, you want to have a good independent investigation. People should be calling for an independent investigation of this. That it is first heard by a prosecutor, a state prosecutor, and secondly, by a jury. They should be calling for this. And if they don't and they back down and it gets worse, it will spread to other states, and it'll just, again, we're at a crossroads. The United States is at a crossroads, and my opinion, a lot of this is stemming from what the United States has done internationally. And I think that's the root of the problem. Like I said, I think it's a Kent State moment. You don't end the problem of Kent State and Jackson State until you end the Vietnam War.
So you connect this to Venezuela. And
yes, Venezuela, and all of in these we've killed 5 to 6 million people. And now we're taunting war with Russia and China. I mean, with Russia and China, it's nuclear. It goes nuclear very quickly. Iran, for instance, if Trump has said he stands ready to go again in Iran. If it doesn't work out well for Israel and Iran is able to launch some missiles on Israel, I would look for this to ratchet up to nuclear. Israel has the nuclear. Iran doesn't, but Israel does. And they believe in all-out war. Mm-hmm. A lot of this neocon theory about using the highest level of military force, which right now is nuclear weapon, comes from Israel. We're taking our cue from Israel. What they've done in a genocide, killing children in Gaza, that's what has blown back on us now. I'm sorry. I think I was talking to a theologian. We were at an event, and the minister had given a first talk at this event the other night. And I said, this actually comes from the Bible. It's reap what you sow. The bottom line is, we are going to reap what we sow. We can't do these things with impunity. There is a reason for law. There is a reason for a prohibition of genocide. It's not because we're especially virtuous. No, it's because we don't want this to happen to us. We want a minimum standards where everyone can agree. We won't murder you if you don't murder us. And you know what? People in power have said, no, we can take oil. We can take rare earth and mineral. We can just seize what we want now because we're the United States. No, who's going to stop us? We have a nuclear bomb. Who is going to stop us? That's what's gone out as a, we hear this in the United Nations. And I think Trump has dissolved a lot of international law has been dissolved, or Trump has tried to dissolve it. And it's blowing back on us. And what I've written about the mass shootings, the mass killings, I saw Tucker Carlson. I know this is really fun, but Crooks, the guy who tried to shoot Trump, he had looked into also using bombs and rental cars and chemical weapons and things. It's not just guns. There are lots of unhinged people now taking their cue from this. I can also be a vigilante, and I can, shoot schools, shoot malls, shoot use bombs, use trucks to run into crowds. This is part of it. I know people don't want to make the connection, but there is a connection. We need to get back to a system where we all respect law and order. And it can't be that one country says we don't have to, every other country you follow it, but we don't have to. Can't be that way. That's like the police saying we can shoot. That's why we have investigations of law enforcement shootings. Because a law enforcement officer, we get to shoot anyone, but no one can shoot us back. That isn't how it works. And if you start doing this, if this devolves into this violent chaos, lots and lots of people will be hurt by it. Not just, it's not one side or the other.
Colleen Rowley, we are going to have to stay vigilant and watch what is happening, because this is a very, very interesting time, and this is very painful. Of course, we pray for the family of RENEE Good, for her wife, for her 3 children, 15, 12, and 6. They do not have their mother now. Her mother had to go identify her baby. Can you imagine? Think about that. So everybody, let's think about that. Whatever, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing. And I've seen 1 or 2 of you talk about the corruption in Minnesota. There's corruption everywhere, everywhere you go. So please don't look at the log in the splint in someone else's eye and ignore the log in your own. It's everywhere. So either we're going to be against corruption, either we're going to be for justice or not. So, Colleen Rowley, I just thank you for all of the work that you've done. I thank you for helping us to understand that, you know what? The bombs we drop overseas, Dr. King said, they would explode at home. And you've been on that mission to tell us that. The blowback we're getting, we've got the lawlessness. It's just, I think if we can pull a president of his country out of his bed with his wife, what can we do in the United States? And bring him here. This is insane. I love you, everybody. I love you, Colleen Rowley. My love to your husband. Thank you for getting to this hotel room quickly so we can do this. But I thank you for this. Everybody, like and share. Colleen Rowley gave us a lot of great context. Great context for what it is that we need to be looking at. You need to ask questions about why it is the federal government is so heavily vested in holding on to this case. What does that mean? Think about this woman. Think about her and her family. She was not a rioter. And if she's a domestic terrorist, anyone who asks any questions about our government on the federal, county, state, local level, you are a terrorist too. That is not the way this is supposed to work. We're supposed to be able to ask questions. In fact, dissent is a very high form of patriotism. Teddy Roosevelt said that. It's the highest form. You're supposed to ask questions. You're not supposed to blindly follow. When you talk about dictatorships, that's what happens in dictatorships. People blindly follow, or they're expected to. That's not the way it's supposed to work in America, everybody. It's not. You're supposed to be able to ask questions. And you're supposed to have a police force who are trustworthy, who are worthy of your trust. You need to start asking some questions about how it is that a physician can watch this horror that happened to RENEE Good. He identifies himself, and the ICE agents say, I don't care. And then he shouts back, I'm a physician. Can I just check her pulse? The other ICE agent said, we've got medics, don't worry about it. You're having a physician watching a woman. You don't know if she's dead yet. You don't know she's been shot. You see her bloody head on that steering wheel. That's what you saw. That's inhumane, everybody. And that ought to concern you. This is not about loving law enforcement or not loving law enforcement. Law enforcement is populated by people, and they have people who love them. And so I appreciate that. That is not where I'm coming from. Where I'm coming from is being humane, being kind. How would you like it if that were your loved one who had the possibility of surviving? You don't know until you tried. Why would you let her bleed out? Why? That ought to be something that really, really concerns you. It ought to bother you. It really ought to bother you that her life was so callously treated and just thrown to the four winds. Who does that? This is not new to our experience, though. We have genocided Native Americans. We're seeing a genocide in the Middle East. We don't take life, we don't treat it as the gift that it is. It is precious, but that is not how we are treating it. We just throw lives away. We think that some people are disposable and some people are not. And for so long, we thought it was just about race, which is an artificial construct. There is no such thing as race. Europeans look the way that they look because they adjusted to their climate. Africans look the way that they look depending upon where they are on the continent. You adjust to your climate. If you're in a cold climate, you have long, flaxen, straight hair that hugs your head to keep you warm. If you are in a hot climate, you have woolly hair that protects your head from the heat. Get it? Yeah. Think about that. So race is not even real. And now we're seeing maybe another Viola Liuzzo moment. Remember the Selma to Montgomery March, the Detroit mother? Her husband was a union leader. She had 5 children. She was so disturbed by Bloody Sunday. She went down to Selma and she was determined to do something, to make a difference. And she did go do that. And she was a volunteer in the movement. That's the way that worked. It was not glamorous, and it was not a whole lot of people running to be a part of that then. Oh, everybody says now, I would have been in Selma. Well, most Americans were not there. Most Americans did not support it. And most of you would not be there today. Let's just keep it 100. But she went. And she never got back to her husband and 5 children. Never got back. Never got back. Because someone decided to blow her brains out as she was driving people, shuttling people from the march to the airport. But it was when this white mother of 5, this wife, was killed, it changed so many things. When the white pastor, Reverend James Reeb, was killed the week before, it made people run down to Selma. And then that week later, when she was killed, it changed something. Because she is not the first person to have been shot at in her car. That happened here in Chicago with a Latina. But I hope that she'll be the last. But apparently not, because the federal agents just shot 2 people in Portland. I don't know the details of it, but that's what we're seeing. We need to have trust in our government, everybody. We have conflicting accounts. We have a Department of Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, who went out in front of this story without knowing anything. Not unless she had been there. She didn't rappel her way in. She didn't know. She might have had access to some of the video, but the appropriate thing to do would have been to let us wait. We're going to examine the videos, and we're going to talk to everybody, and then we're going to see. That is what she could have done. But no, they came out and called this young lady a domestic terrorist. They lied because we see the video. Everyone saw from different angles that clearly she was someone who was frightened. She wasn't running this man over, which the president said more than once. That it's amazing that this man survived being run over. That is not what happened. Maybe he was conflating what had happened to him some months ago, and he was not even running then, but he was dragged by a car. And one could understand him having PTSD, of course. And he should have been relieved of his duties, given hardship pay, and sent to a mental health facility, or certainly he should have been given leave to get treatment, to save himself, to save his family, and to save the people who he's supposed to be observing. Because I can't say that I can't say that they're protecting. So that did not happen. He was someone who had been traumatized and he was put back on the streets. And look at what he did. Look at what he did. Think about that. He never should have been on the streets. Jonathan Ross, which is his name, should not have been on the streets. And now a family has absolutely been devastated. Because make no mistake, at the heart of this story are human beings who are brokenhearted tonight. 3 children, 15, 12, and 6. A wife who has lost her partner. A mother and family who have lost a daughter and a sister. Think about that. Why didn't he shoot out the tires? Look, I'm not in law enforcement, but you already had her license plate numbers. If you really, really wanted her, all you had to do was take down the numbers and then get her later. You didn't have to do that. You did not have to do that. Didn't have to shoot her. Didn't have to do that. But yet he did that. Think about that. Think about it if it were you. Think about if you were standing on the street and that was someone you loved in that car. How would you be feeling right now? I hope you all will think about that. I hope you all will start thinking about that. And, I appreciate all of the chat that we have with the Morning Stars. And I want you all to keep it coming, but I need you to keep it respectful. And I need you to not only keep it respectful, but contribute in a way that is constructive. Don't troll. Don't try to be provocative in a negative way. Make us think. Make us think and make us feel in a good way. But there's no need to be here and to be insightful. It's one thing to be inciting. It's another thing to be exciting. You don't need to incite anyone here. Don't play that game. I've seen all of that. And I've survived it all. I've seen more than one person point a loaded gun at my father while he was speaking. And you know what? I had to learn just to sit there and wait and hope and pray that that person did not shoot and that people could subdue these people and get them out the way and pray that there were no more to come. I've seen it all, you all. So please don't give me that. And don't put that in this discussion. That's not fair. What we're trying to do is find out what happened and how we can get justice for RENEE Good's family. That is what we need. We are in the 250th year of our republic. The question is, will it survive? The rule of law is what is at risk here. More and more, we do not trust the police. The people in Minneapolis have broken hearts tonight. And they want justice. And they're not going to stop until they get it. Because these people are not accustomed to being treated in this way. And sometimes it takes people who have a certain amount of privilege to see what the witnesses to the killing of RENEE Good saw. I've seen several interviews of several witnesses, and they all say, I never would have believed something like this could have happened. In sharp contrast to what Daniela Frazier, who just a few miles away in Minneapolis 5 years ago, what she knew was going to happen to George Floyd. She knew when she pulled out her phone and told her cousin, her 9-year-old cousin, go in that store and don't come out until I come and get you. She knew something bad was going to happen. She knew that more than likely, at 17, that this person was going to die. So maybe what we're going to do is bring together these two different experiences in America that we have in American life. And I hope that that is the case. Two different experiences. One group who cannot believe that this could happen, that Renee Good could be killed in front of their very eyes on their street. This doesn't happen over here. It's not supposed to. And another group of people who see this happen far too frequently, just about every day. Everybody, we need to wake up and make some real decisions about who we are. But before we understand who we are, we need to understand whose we are. I need to understand who you belong to. Think about that. Are you trying to be godly or not? I'm not evangelizing here, but you need to be answerable to someone or someone bigger than you and I. That's a wonderful song from years ago. If your heart doesn't hurt just a little bit, ache just a little bit for Renee Good's family, I pray for you, because you ought to feel something, because this woman should not be dead tonight. She shouldn't be. Think about that, everybody. Think about that. She should not be dead. She should be alive. Think about that. I love you, everybody. I'll see you in the next few days. In fact, like and share the show that we did yesterday with Cornel West. I think he was so profound, as he always is. We're going to be talking with Fred Hampton's lawyer tomorrow afternoon, an extra show, so that because he has so much experience in this space, and I cannot wait to speak with Attorney G. Flint Taylor. Indeed, he was the person whose investigation, his initial investigation turned that case around, because the way the Fred Hampton murder was first reported, we were told that it was a shootout between the Black Panthers and the police. All of the bullets, scores of bullets, were all going into the apartment building. That is what he found out. One or two were coming out. They killed the bodyguard, Mark Clark, immediately. There were two people killed that night, Mark Clark and Fred Hampton. So think about that. I cannot wait to hear what he's going to have to say. So everybody, sending you, bless your heart, bell ringing for your daughter, for your granddaughter, sending you so much love. We cannot wait. We cannot wait to see how this is going to work out for you. And I know it's going to be a good thing. Look at God. God is so good. Correctional officer for the lockdown. So everybody, be loving and be good. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. God bless.